Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you very much for coming along today. So basically the talk I'm going to give today is discovering Antarctica for the first time. Just to introduce myself, my name's Simon Evans. I'm the manager for the UK office of Chimo Adventures. We're a specialist tour operator organising trips to Latin America, Antarctica and the Arctic as well. I've been selling these trips now for about the last 6 years. I've been lucky enough to go down to Antarctica myself and up to the Arctic as well. So I know sort of quite a fair bit about the sort of different trips and itineraries on offer. I know when you're sort of looking for a trip to Antarctica, there's quite a lot of information to sort of absorb. There's lots of different options, lots of different itineraries, knowing when to go. So hopefully with this session, I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview just to make it a bit easier to know what to look for and the kind of things to help you make that decision, basically. So yeah, I'm just going to, a brief sort of intro. I'll give you a sort of bit of details on how to get down there, the sort of different times of the year to go, the different itineraries that you can do, the kind of wildlife that you can expect to see down there, the different ships that are available as well, what a typical day in Antarctica would be, and then some of the optional activities as well. And then obviously if you've got any questions as well at the end, then I'll be happy to take some of those as well. Just a brief intro on Chimo as a company. So we offer tailor-made itineraries and small group tours to Latin America. We also do the expedition cruises down to Antarctica, which we'll obviously talk about today, and also the cruises up to the Arctic as well. We've got an office here in Waterloo, so if ever you're in town and you want to come in and see us, you're more than welcome to. We also have our own local operations offices in Argentina, Brazil, Chile and Peru, and we're fully ABTA and ATOL bonded as well. So first of all, how to get there for a trip to Antarctica. There's two kind of main hubs really that you sort of venture to go south. Probably 80% of the cruises will depart from Ushuaia, which is at the tip of Argentina here. To get to there, you would normally fly into Buenos Aires from the UK. So there's direct flights from Heathrow with BA. Otherwise, there's various airlines that go via the European hubs, such as Madrid, Paris, Amsterdam, into Buenos Aires. We'd normally recommend having an overnight there just because of the flight connections. And then from there, you fly down to Ushuaia at the tip of Argentina. Again, we'd normally recommend one night in Ushuaia prior to the cruise. The flights between Ushuaia and Buenos Aires are prone to delays and cancellations, so it's always good just to have that bit of extra time as a buffer, just to, in case of any delays getting down there. The other main hub as well, which tends to be more for the fly cruise options, is from Punta Arenas, which is just a bit further north in Patagonia. So to get to there, you would fly into Santiago from the UK. BA have just started their new direct service now from Heathrow. Otherwise, again, there's other options via European hubs or São Paulo that you can get into Santiago. And then from Santiago, it's a flight down to Punta Arenas. So when to go? Basically, the Antarctic season runs from the end of October, beginning of November time, right through to the end of March. People kind of ask when's the best time to go. It's quite a difficult question because there's not really a best time as such. There's different highlights to see throughout the season. So depending on whether you have a particular preference on a certain thing might deter your decision. Generally, the high season is the kind of middle of their summer, so kind of late December going into January time. That's also the most expensive time as well. But early on in the season, the kind of springtime, November, early December, or end of February, late March time is the kind of cheaper times to go. So in terms of what you're going to see, in the early summertime from November, early December, this is the kind of springtime period in Antarctica, so the snow's at its most pristine then, everything's very white. It's probably when it's most beautiful. You have a lot of ice then, because obviously it's still breaking up from the winter season. You have lots of courtship displays with the penguin colonies as well. So if you're really into the kind of scenic side of things, then that's probably when you see Antarctica at its most beautiful, and it's a really nice time to go. Moving into the sort of full summertime, which would be mid-December through to January, this is when the days are at their longest, so you have 24-hour sunlight. It's generally the warmest months as well. In theory, it should be the best weather because it's the middle of the summer, but obviously with the weather systems these days, there's no kind of guarantees on that. You have the midnight sun then, And one of the main draws as well is that the penguin chicks hatch then just before Christmas time. So from sort of, just before Christmas through January, you'll have the penguin chicks, which is a big draw for a lot of people. And then going into the late summertime, sort of February, March time, this is generally the best time for the whale watching. Generally this time of year you'll have more sightings for the whales, so if you're particularly interested in spotting whales, then that's generally a time to go. That's not to say that you won't see them earlier on in the season. I was down there in November and we saw orcas then, we saw minkies, we saw humpbacks as well. But generally as a rule, later in the season tends to be a bit better. Also later in the season, if you're looking to sort of go a bit further south and maybe across the Antarctic Circle, generally the trips for those itineraries are later on in the season just because the ice has receded. So it tends to be easier to get further south at that time of year as well. Also later in the season, the penguin chicks start to fledge. So you'll still see thousands of penguins each day, but there might not necessarily be as many as you might see earlier on in the season. So the different itineraries on offer, there's quite a few different kind of trips that you can do to get down to Antarctica. So I'll just give you a kind of brief overview on a few of those. There are nowadays lots of different variations on these, but these are kind of the core ones, just to give you a basic overview. So going from Ushuaia, I guess there's three kind of core itineraries that you can do from there. The kind of most popular standard one that generally people would do, especially as an introduction to Antarctica, would be the classic itinerary, which would be a 10 to 12 day trip. So you'd depart from Ushuaia, you take a couple of days sailing across the Drake Passage, and then you come into the South Shetland Islands and down into the Antarctic Peninsula from there. You'd normally have around 4 days in the peninsula. So during that time, you'd have landings each day, so in the morning and in the afternoon, sort of get out to experience the wildlife, see the ice, and just get a real feel for Antarctica, basically. Generally, you do a landing in the morning, come back to the ship in lunchtime, the ship would reposition, then you kind of go out again in the afternoon. And then, so at the end of those 4 or 5 days, you then start sailing back to Ushuaia. There's also a longer itinerary, which you'd go a bit further south, and cross the Antarctic Circle. These would normally be sort of 12 to 14 days. The main advantage of these, it just gives you longer in Antarctica, so you normally have at least 6 or maybe 7 days in Antarctica. So again, it just gives you more opportunities for landings, and obviously it's quite a big thing to say you've crossed the Antarctic Circle as well. Then there's also the sort of extended itineraries, which normally go up to about 3 weeks. And these ones would also take in the Falkland Islands and up the top here, and South Georgia as well. For the Falklands, you normally spend a sort of couple of days there. There's some fantastic wildlife opportunities there. And then across to South Georgia, which if you're really into wildlife, then that's kind of regarded as one of the sort of best places in the world. I'll go into detail later in the kind of wildlife that you can see there. And then from South Georgia, you'd sail back down into the peninsula. Normally have sort of 3 or 4 days in Antarctica itself, and then back up to Ushuaia. And then for the fly cruises, which will go from Punta Arenas in Chile, so you'd fly from Punta Arenas itself and into King George Island, and then from there you would board the ship and then sail down into the peninsula. The kind of standard trips for those would normally be 6 to 8 days. But there are a few different itineraries now where, for example, you can fly from Punta Arenas into the Falklands and then sail down into Antarctica from there. And they range anything from sort of 10 to 17 days. But for the core kind of classic fly cruises, then generally you'll go from Punta Arenas into King George Island. There's obviously advantages and disadvantages with the fly cruising. They tend to be a lot more expensive than the ones that go from Ushuaia. There's not as many options for that, so the prices tend to be more. They get booked up a lot more quickly as well. And obviously, for some people, crossing the Drake Passage is part of the experience. It can be, notoriously rough, but it can be quite smooth as well at times. But if you're not too good with seasickness, then certainly the fly cruise is an option to consider. So just touching briefly on some of the wildlife that you're likely to see down there. You'll be guaranteed to see thousands of penguins every single day. There's lots of Gentoos, the Adelis, and the chin straps. So in the peninsula, they're going to be the three main breeds that you're going to see. There's also a huge number of seals down there. So these are a pair of leopard seals that I'd seen down there with the mother with her young. There's also crab-eater seals, there's Weddell seals, there's elephant seals, so you get a huge variation on those as well. You should hopefully see some whales as well. Lots of humpbacks, minke whales, there's orcas, some blue fin whales down there as well. So again, as I said, sort of later in the season tends to be better for that, but yeah, there's chances to see them throughout the season. There's also a huge amount of bird life, so you should see lots of albatross, it's skuas. So yeah, there's just a vast number of different things to see down there. If you're taking in South Georgia, then it's probably best known for the king penguins, which are these guys here. You're literally going to see tens of thousands of those, so it really is quite an impressive sight. South Georgia is also fantastic as well for the big male elephant seals. So again, you should have really good chances of seeing a lot of these while you're down there. And for the Falklands, again, you've got lots of different penguin types in the Falklands, and you also have really good chances, especially if you go early on in the season, of seeing the albatrosses, the chicks hatching as well. Moving on to the different ships, there's obviously a huge kind of number and variation of the types of ships that you can take. I mean, we're generally selling the kind of smaller expedition vessels. When you're down in Antarctica itself, you're actually only allowed 100 people onto the ice at any one time. So we tend to try and use the ships that are, you know, not too much more than 100 people, just to allow you to have more time to get out there and experience everything. If you're on the sort of big ships with over 200-300 people, then it just means that your kind of experience and potential time that you have to get out on the land and experience Antarctica is very limited. So by using these smaller ships, it allows everybody that's on board to, you know, to get a really good experience and get out there and see Antarctica firsthand. Basically, I mean, there's ships that vary in category, from budget right up to the top-end luxury. So I'll just give you a kind of brief overview on some of the different categories here, just so you have an idea. So this is a really popular one that we tend to sell, called the MV Ushuaia. This would be the kind of the more the budget range, so the sort of lower end of the price scale. Still, you know, pretty comfortable, but compared to some of the other ships, it's definitely a lot more basic. So yeah, I mean, this would be the sort of dining room that you'd expect to see there. You have quite a sociable communal area, but again, fairly basic. And this would be sort of one of the kind of standard cabins that you'd be looking for on that kind of ship. Sort of going into the more of a mid-range, this would be the Expedition, which is, again, it's a very popular ship that we sell. Again, very comfortable and probably, you know, just one step up from the MV Ushuaia. You have the big communal dining room, fantastic meals every day, have very sociable lounge and bar area, where you do the sort of presentations and lectures as well. The advantage of this ship as well, it has a mudroom, so you can leave all your wet gear down there at the end of the day with all the landings. That's heated as well, so when you come down the next day, all your gear's dry, and your boots are nice and warm as well. And that would be a kind of standard category 3 cabin that you'd be looking at on that particular ship. So again, you know, fairly basic. It's not, you know, high-end luxury by any mean, but it's kind of got everything that you need on there, and you know, it's very comfortable for the duration of the trip. And then moving into something, you know, slightly higher category, this is a Sea Spirit, which is the ship, again, we sell a lot of. And you'll sort of see from the, you know, the decor on the interior, it's just a kind of step up, basically. And generally with all of these, the kind of, you know, that you'll see the difference in the price ranges as well, just in terms of the different categories of ship. So yeah, this would be the sort of lecture lounge where they do all the presentations and lectures. The bar area, which you normally sort of head to after your dinner. And this would be the kind of typical cabin on here. So as you can see, it's a bit more of a step up. Okay, so a typical day in Antarctica, what would you normally do when you get there? So basically, when you're sailing across from Ushuaia, the sailing's normally a couple of days. So on there's not, you're not going to see a huge amount. In the wake of the ship, you'll have a lot of bird life coming up, just because the wake's kicking up a lot of krill and different things for the birds to feed on. If you don't want to sort of stand out in the back for 2 days, then the expedition team will be hosting lectures throughout that time. So generally on the ships, you'll have a full expedition team, which will include a geologist, a historian, ornithologist, and just various kind of specialists in each of their fields. So each of those people will be doing a lecture on their designated subject throughout the kind of 2 days sailing. So that makes it, really interesting to learn about some of the things they have to say. And then once you get into Antarctica, then a sort of typical day would be as follows. So breakfast, you normally have a wake-up call maybe around 7 o'clock, give or take a bit. Quite often you have some of the keen bird watchers or people that just want to get some fresh air early in the morning are up on deck when you get up there and trying to get some early snaps. Breakfast would normally be sort of 8, half 8-ish. Again, all these timings are, because it's expedition cruising, there's no kind of fixed itinerary, and it very much depends on the conditions and what's happening with wildlife. So nothing's ever set in stone, but this kind of just gives you a general overview, basically. After a big breakfast to get your energy for the day, you'd head out for the first morning landing. Generally, the slot would be about 3 hours, give or take a bit. So everyone would get their gear on, go down to the mudroom, jump out onto the Zodiac and head on to land for the morning, basically. So on the landing, you'd hopefully maybe have a penguin colony there. There might be a chance of some seals being there. It may be on the cruise over that there's a whale sighting or some seals in the water. So it very much depends, what's happening with the wildlife and the local conditions, what you're going to see, basically. Once onto the land, then you'd maybe have a couple of hours there just to kind of chill out. If there's some penguins there, you could sit yourself down, they'll come up to you and maybe kind of explore you a bit and see what you have to say for yourself. And then, at the end of that kind of session, you'll then head back to the ship. You'll have a sort of big lunch prepared for you there. You'll maybe have an hour or two to kill while the ship repositions itself. So you have the opportunity, for example, to go up to the bridge, maybe speak to the captain, see what's going on for the day. It might be that you have a whale sighting from the ship, in which case, everybody runs out and gets the cameras ready and enjoys that. Then you have your big buffet lunch, get some more energy for the day, and head out again in the afternoon for another landing at a different spot, because by this time the ship will have repositioned itself. And then at the end of that landing, you generally come back to the ship. There'd be sort of tea, coffee, snacks ready for you when you get back. And then generally the expedition leader would do a kind of overview and a recap of what you've seen and done that day. So you'd have a kind of map showing the route that you'd done, maybe go through all the different wildlife that you've seen. It might be that some of the expedition team have taken videos and they've got some really good footage or some really good photos. So we kind of talk through those and share some of the videos that you'd seen that day. You'd also generally have a happy hour there, so you maybe have a quick relaxing drink before you go up to dinner in the evening. If it's a nice evening, then you'd have dinner out on the deck maybe. It's a pretty special experience. And then after dinner, obviously, you've had quite an early start, so it might be that people want to just relax, have an early night. You might have a really nice sunset like this. You also have the bar. Quite some of the ships as well have some sort of entertainment, whether it be a musician or some of the expedition team telling tales of their previous experiences. Generally it's a very informal experience. Generally the people on there, it's all very like-minded people that are very interested and desperate to get down to Antarctica. So you'll definitely find that you make some very good friends on there. Just a fantastic experience overall, basically. Just in terms of, generally the sort of standard packages will include all of your meals, obviously all the lectures and guides, and the sort of standard landings that you do each day. Some of the ships offer additional activities as well, so there's a few different options that you can do. Quite often for these there's additional costs involved, just depending on whether or not you want to sort of get involved in that, you can sort of choose to do that. Kayaking is one of the options that a lot of the ships offer. Generally these are done at the same time as the landing, so if you are going to take this option, just be aware that it means you probably wouldn't be able to do the regular landing for that day. You don't have to do every single trip that goes out on the kayak. You can kind of pick and choose as you want. But for some people, it's a really nice option. It obviously means that you're getting to places that the rest of the crew just doing the regular landings are not going to get to. So it's definitely a very unique experience for you. There's also the ice camping, which I was, I say fortunate enough to do, but it was quite an experience. I mean, I'm definitely glad I did it. I would say I probably stayed outside a little bit too long, got a bit too cold, so it's quite hard to warm up after that. But it's definitely something worth doing. So basically, with the ice camping, you would obviously it very much depends on the conditions, but as soon as there's one night when it's looking good, then they get everything ready to go out. So you'd have dinner that night, and then after dinner, you'd jump on the Zodiacs, head out to the landing spot, and set up the camp for the night. You sort of make a temporary toilet for the night, and then you're just kind of left to it basically. So, but yeah, it's a fantastic experience. You'd probably then the Zodiacs come back out about 5 o'clock in the morning to pick you up, and then you head back to the ship. Try and warm up a bit and then have breakfast, and then you carry on with the next day basically. So, but it's pretty cool to say that you've camped on Antarctica for the night, so it's definitely something worth doing. If you think that's crazy, then there's also this as well. This is definitely not for the faint-hearted. This picture is actually quite a nice day. It definitely wasn't that nice when I did it. But yeah, most of the ships will give you this option as well. There's no additional charge for this. But yeah, if you're crazy enough, again, it's a pretty cool thing to say that you've been swimming in Antarctica. So. Also, some of the ships offer things like snowshoeing, mountaineering. There's also, if you're really interested in things like skiing as well, there's potential to do some backcountry skiing or cross-country skiing. Some of the ships have some real kind of sort of specialist activities. There's even diving that you can do on one as well. So yeah, if you're looking to do kind of, really, that kind of thing, a bit more active, then there's definitely options that you can do that with as well. So I think that's pretty much it, really. I don't know if you guys have any questions at all that you'd like to ask. Also, just to say, we've actually got our stand here today as well, so we're over in the Latin America section. I've left some brochures out here. I think there's some more down here if you want to take a brochure. Feel free to give me a shout. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Do you have to bring any special gear, or do you get the gear on the boat?
Yeah. So the question was, do you have to bring any special gear with you? It depends on the ship. I mean, basically all of the ships will provide the boots for you for the landing, so you literally just need some comfortable footwear for the ship during the daytime. Some of the ships now will provide a big jacket for you, a polar jacket, so you don't need to worry about that. Other ships don't, so if you don't have that yourself, then you can actually rent them in Ushuaia. None of the ships provide the trousers, so you need a sort of decent pair of waterproof trousers. And then aside from that, really, it's just lots of layers, because the weather, the temperature can vary day to day. Obviously, gloves, hats, and that kind of thing. So, yeah. The question was, how cold does it get when it's camping? It very much just depends on the conditions. I mean, generally, when you do the camping, it's on a calmer night, just because they don't want to take you out and sort of risk everybody getting sick. But I think the night I did it probably dropped down to about minus 15 or so. So it's quite fresh, yeah. Yeah. Best months of South Georgia and Falklands. I mean, the wildlife's there pretty much year-round, so the king penguins and the elephant seals you'll see there throughout the season, so there's not really necessarily a best or worst time. With the Falklands, probably earlier on in the season if you want to see the albatross chicks. But again, the penguins will be there kind of for the whole season, so yeah. Yep. When's the worst time to go across the Drake's Passage? I don't really have an answer for that, to be honest, because it really does vary just depending on the conditions for that day. I mean, I guess in theory, the best time should be, I guess, the middle of the summertime when the weather potentially should be better, but it's one of the most notoriously kind of rough areas of sea in the whole world, so it really can change on a daily basis. So, I mean, the reports we've had this year is generally it's been pretty calm for a lot of the crossings. But yeah, I mean, it really can change from day to day, so there's no kind of definite answer to that, I'm afraid. Yeah.
All the photographs tend to show a ship with quite pristine and empty-looking waters. What's it actually like in terms of how many other ships do you like to see? Is it going to be quite busy?
Yeah, I mean, you probably will see other ships while you're down there. I mean, generally the ships tend to work it so that there's always one relatively close by, just because you are so remote, and if there is any, issues that you have down there, that you have somebody nearby to kind of come and rescue you. So, I mean, you are in one of the most remote places in the whole world. But saying that, you probably, when I was down there, I saw 3 or 4 other ships in the 10 days that I was down there. So yeah, I mean, you still feel very remote, and obviously when you do the landings, you don't see anybody else. But it might be that while you're down there, you do pass, another ship or 2. Yeah. I mean, it's not like a motorway with with lots of ships coming by, but you will see probably at least say 3 or 4 other ones down there. Yeah. Yep.
What's the sea temperature?
That's a good question. Very, very cold. I'm not too sure. I guess I don't know, to be honest. I think probably just around freezing. I think with the salt, then that makes it not freeze completely, if I'm right. I know when I sort of jumped in, I can just say it's very, very cold. Yep.
Does one need any kind of visas or special permits?
Any visas or special permits? No. So for Argentina and Chile, you basically just need a passport that's got the relative validity on it, so normally 6 months. You just get stamped on arrival there. When you're leaving to go from either Ushuaia or Punta Arenas, you don't need. You just sort of show your passport. You don't need any stamp or any special requirements. So no, nothing like that needed. Yep. I mean, I was there mid-November, and it never really fully set, so you'd have this kind of dusk. I guess around about 10:30 or so, the sun would be at its lowest, and then maybe around 3 o'clock, it would kind of start coming up for the day. So, it never went completely dark, but you kind of got this eerie kind of nice light. So, yeah, it's quite cool. Okay, I think that's everybody. So, thank you very much for your time. And, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout. Thank you.